Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be here and be able to talk. I'm really excited about this convention. Pocket Gamer Connects, I think, is a great opportunity for us all to come together, and we're at a really unique point in our in the industry where we can. Mobile games and VR games are really just on the rise, especially when it comes to narrative. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity to share some of the learnings that we've had at Seismic on how to tell compelling narratives in mobile games. Is this the clicker?
Yes.
Okay, all right. A little bit about myself before we get into it too much. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. I've worked on a lot of games, a lot of different kinds of games. I've also worked on a wide variety of different licenses and major IPs, as well as original IPs. And I'm an active screenwriter who's worked in both television and film. So I have a bit of a unique perspective on writing for traditional media, as well as writing and developing games in different medias within games. Currently, I'm the Chief Creative Officer over at Seismic Games. We've got 5 projects that we're working on right now. We're an independent studio working on 2 mobile games, 1 VR mobile game, a location-based ride, and a mobile interactive game show. They're all unannounced, so I can't really talk about them much, but they're all with major IPs, and I hope to be able to share more about them in the next year or 2 as they become announced games. But one of the things we talk about at Seismic a lot is how to tell compelling narratives in mobile games and how to try to figure out how to bring out the most compelling narratives in mobile games. Now, a lot of the assumption that comes in telling stories in mobile games is that it's pretty much impossible. You've got a small little screen, you've got a very distracted audience, you've got a short session length, and you have very little time and a lot of very little tools to be able to tell a compelling narrative. And if you just take a look at the top-grossing mobile games here, you can see between Candy Crush and the strategy games and the casino games, we're not exactly dealing with Shakespeare here. We're not even really dealing with like Last of Us here. It's just like, it's not exactly what mobile games are known for. But there are some exceptions to those rules. The Telltale games, Episode, and Choices, just to name a few, of games that tell compelling narratives on mobile devices. Telltale's a little bit of an exception to the rule. You know, they're more of a long format game. They're not free to play, and to be honest, I feel like they're best experienced with as big a screen as you can get and on the headphones. Episode and Choices are a little more in the true mobile experience. They're free to play, short session length, and designed with bite-sized content, but they're focused around a very specific audience. And what we're going to talk about a little bit is how to tell narratives and create narratives in a broader sense of the scale into a broader audience. To take a look at some of the way games and narratives are told in other mediums, movies and TV obviously have a lot going for it when it comes to telling stories. They've got long session lengths and actors and special effects and seasonal arcs. I mean, for a TV show, you've got an hour to tell a story, you've got a season to tell a story, you've got multiple seasons to tell a story. Movies obviously have big budgets and captive audiences, and they've been doing it for decades and decades, so it's pretty easy to tell stories in there. Plus, they have this amazing cinematic tool set to work from with cinematography and special effects and sound and 3D. So they kind of get a pass on how to tell great or amazing narratives. Console and PC games utilize a lot of the same benefits that film and TV do with the high production cinematics and the long session lengths, but they integrate something that we can actually take from mobile and VR, which is the interactivity and the emergent stories. And by interacting with the player while telling your story, you're able to really get the story to be stickier because the player is actually experiencing the story rather than just passively watching it. Now, VR, when creating narratives, and on the one hand, has some amazing opportunities and tools that none of the other mediums have. You've got full immersion, you've got a real presence in the world as the player, and you have the next level of interactivity where you can actually physically reach out and use your body to tell the story. This is both a good thing and a bad thing. In some ways, we can actually emotionally engage the player like we've never have before, but we also are missing some of the tools that the traditional forms of media have, and this can be kind of a hindrance. But I'll get back to that in a sec. When we were making Star Wars Battlefront, what we set out to do was create a possibility engine. What we wanted to do was create a tool set where players could experience the battles of Star Wars any way they want. And the way we always thought of it was we're creating basically a play set where you have access to every Star Wars toy at your disposal. So we created the figures and the vehicles and the gameplay and the weapons and the environments, and then we just empowered the player to create their own story. We didn't want to retell the story of Luke Skywalker or of Darth Vader. We wanted to let the players create their own stories, and that's exactly what happened. And really the team was left with this sense of, wow, if we could create this and use this tool, these emergent stories that show up, we might really have something here. So we've kind of applied that into almost every game that we do. The two other kind of stories I want to talk about are progression stories and social stories. The three of these right now in mobile gaming have a real opportunity to bring the narratives in mobile gaming to the next level, and we're really excited about that. I want to tell a story a little bit about kind of my experience and with Minecraft as it involves emergent stories. So I was playing Minecraft with my son, and we decided on the phone to both build the house that we live in. And so we're like, okay, we split ourselves and we went and built the house. And then we decided to compare the houses. And of course, my house was like pretty realistic to scale, and I put the door where the door is, and and all this stuff. And when I looked at my son's house, it was just way cooler than mine. It had like a lava moat around it, and a giant spire, and trapdoors, and monster closets, and we showed it to everyone, and everyone agreed his version of the house was way cooler than mine. And when he would tell the story of how he came to every decision and why he put everything where it was, I just saw his eyes light up with the creativity, and it occurred to me that Minecraft is really just this tool that it lets your creativity go wild, and the story that you create as you take these relatively mundane tools and shape them into your own personal vision is really kind of amazing. And it was this emergent story that evolved as he created this. And as a consequence, now I have to build a lava moat in our real house in order to make sure that he's gets his dream house. So I'm still working on that. But the other kind of story that we're dealing with a lot is progression stories. I'm not talking about progression stories from the character's point of view as they progress through a game. I'm talking more about the player's progression through a game and their experience and how they relate to their personal life. So I'm a pretty avid Galaxy of Heroes fan, and if you've played this game, you know that Yoda is a really hard chase character to get in Galaxy of Heroes. He only shows up like once a month, and he only shows up for a little bit of time, and in order to even try to get Yoda as a collectible character, you have to have like 5 Jedi that are fully maxed in level 7 stars in order to get him. And I had been determined that I was going to get Yoda on my team. And unfortunately, when the Yoda event happened was exactly when I was having my wedding anniversary. And so I was away with my wife for the weekend, and I was trying to figure out a way to somehow get Yoda without my wife knowing that I was playing the game. So I would literally, every time she'd go to the bathroom, I'd pull out the phone and I'd play for a little bit. When she'd fall asleep, I'd play a little more. Before she woke up, I'd play a little more. And I got through most of the weekend without her ever knowing that I was getting really close to getting Yoda. But as it kind of got to the end, I was going to try my best to pull this off, and we were in the middle of a play. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to do this. So then it occurred to me that there's an intermission in the middle of a play. And I was like, oh, okay, if I figured out how much money I had to spend, and if I kind of faked it, I could pull this off. So the intermission happens, and I kind of faked a little bit of a stomachache, and I went to the bathroom, and I muted my phone, went in a stall, and started spending kind of like crazy to try to get Yoda. And the lights are flickering, the to signal that the play is about to go on again. And I'm really, really close, and I finally do it, and I'm just cheering in the bathroom as I get this character that I've been striving for, and I was all excited. And I didn't even bother to put my phone to minimize the app. I just put it back in my pocket. I run out back into the theater. I sit down. The play's about to start. They remind you to turn off your phone, so I turn off my phone, mute my phone. And the play starts, and it's all quiet, and I realize too late that I had muted my phone when I went into the bathroom, and so when I just reached my pocket, I had unmuted my phone. And so as the play starts, out of my pocket emanates this giant Star Wars music. And I was totally ratted out, and the entire theater kind of slowly turns at me, including my wife, who's just giving me this death stare because she knows now that what I've been trying to do this whole time. But I didn't really care because I got Yoda. And just as a side note too, if you ever try to like use the Jedi mind tricks on your spouse with like, that's not my phone, totally doesn't work. Totally doesn't work. Anyway, what I realized about that whole experience is that Yoda and Star Wars had integrated itself into the weekend and the story of my anniversary weekend, and every time I play Yoda, I'm reminded of my anniversary weekend in the game, and so the two are kind of, you know, permanently linked as an experience in my mind, and that's not only the story of my anniversary weekend, but also the story of how I play this game. And this doesn't just apply to these kind of games. I mean, even if you talk about the casino games, if you ask anyone who plays these kind of games how their day went in Bingo Blitz, they will tell you every single number and how it showed up and the highs and lows of how it played. They'll tell you about the characters they've unlocked, they'll tell you about the environments they've unlocked, and for them, they have their own personal story of the highs and lows and their experience because it's a personal story to them. The other kind of stories that we can explore in mobile is social stories and stories that involve multiple players. And in particular, I was a little late to the Candy Crush game, and I started playing, and as you do, the first time when I was playing Candy Crush, I scrolled up to see where all my friends were on there. And surprisingly, when I got to really high up on the Candy Crush ladder, I saw my mom was sitting there. As any self-respecting gamer, I was like, this is not acceptable. I cannot have my mom be better than me in a game. So I made it my personal goal to get better than my mom in Candy Crush. And I started playing, and she noticed that I was playing, and so she would start sending me messages like votes of encouragement. Oh, good job, son, you're doing great, you know, and like she would start sending me lollipops and bonuses, and you know, I was like, Mom, I'm not 8 years old. I don't need like candy and cheats in order to be able to beat you in Candy Crush. But I took them anyway. And it took me months, but I was eventually getting up there, and it was like this whole epic thing, and I finally beat my mom and passed my mom in Candy Crush, and I was so proud. And Thanksgiving rolled around, and I was trying to find a way to kind of work it into the conversation so that I could gloat a little bit, and I said, oh, you know, funny you mentioned dessert because, Mom, I just totally beat you in Candy Crush. I'm higher than you now. To which she responded, oh, son, oh, honey, I don't play Candy Crush anymore. I'm on to Soda Crush now. And I pull out my phone, and sure enough, she's like way ahead of me in Soda Crush, and I have yet to actually beat her in Soda Crush, and I'm still determined to do it. But that's my story of Candy Crush, and it has nothing to do with the creepy Candyland and all the characters. It has to do with my personal engagement and a story involving me and my mom. But there's also the competitive side of stories that come in, and the last story I want to tell you is about my friends Jim and Troy and their Clash Royale story. So my friend Troy is a free-to-play player. He refuses to spend any money in mobile games, and he prides himself on being able to beat any game and be the best in any game without having to spend. He is the top-ranked player in our Clash clan, and he does an awesome job. My friend Jim has no problem spending decent amounts of money in order to win. And he came to the game late, joined our clan, and started working his way up. And you know, Troy was keeping an eye on him, but every time he would hit a wall, he would spend through and get through. And as inevitably you can expect, Jim started getting awfully close to Troy. And then eventually at some point, because he played and paid enough, he passed Troy in the rankings. Now Troy was pissed about this. I mean, he was like, he took a few days off of work. He just decided to devote himself to Clash Royale until he beat and got a higher rank than Jim. And he did it, and he came back to work all happy and proud, of which, of course, Jim's only response was to be able to spend a little more money to get back ahead of Troy. And when Troy actually and this went on and on and on as they kind of went and competed over and over for like months. And it got really ugly. They almost lost their friendship over this, and they were threatening to leave the clan, and it was getting really, really bad. And luckily it was saved because Clash Royale released 2v2 mode. And suddenly, now instead of competing against each other and yelling at each other across their phones, Troy and Jim were playing together, and it was the two of them against the world. And their entire relationship and their entire dynamic changed. They were now one team working against everyone else. And now that the season of 2v2, the summer of 2v2 is coming out on Clash Royale, I'm very interested to see what the next chapter in their collective story is going to be as they try to take on the world as a team. So getting back to VR for a little bit, what I was saying is that some of the things about VR that we have, the opportunities, are also some of its hindrances as far as it comes to telling collective narratives. Since there's no camera, and since the player is the camera, it's very difficult to tell traditional narratives because you don't know where the player's looking. You don't have any of the cinematic tools and cinematography to be able to guide the story. Also, this innate sense, built in with this immersion, is this innate sense of the feeling that the player is themselves, that they are physically there, and that they feel the need for acknowledgement in their presence. Both those things, plus the opportunity to evoke real emotions, real sense of vertigo, real sense of claustrophobia, these real visceral emotions in VR, are all the more reason why both VR and mobile are able to tell these emergent stories, these progression stories, and these social stories. Because telling a story of an actual real person experiencing something real in VR is much more visceral and emotional than telling a story where the player feels like they're a fly on the wall watching an interaction as interactions happen in front of them. And again, in mobile, these stories of the player as they play through and they evolve, the stories of progression as they move through the game, and these social stories involving other players are three opportunities that mobile has to really bring narratives to the next level. By creating tools and creating possibility engines, by giving the doors and the keys and the environments to our players, we allow the players to become the storytellers. And ultimately, by doing this, we end up all making games together collectively. And that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about the future of mobile and the future of telling stories in both mobile and VR. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. Actually, I think that last point was really interesting. For me, the interesting comparison between the mobile and the VR side is, we're still dealing with the most personal device, whether it's a phone or a tablet. With VR, we're having to take a distinct choice to immerse ourselves into a space. And I'm wondering if you think there's going to be nuances, difference of telling because of those differences of behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you commit to VR, you're committing to a longer session length, you're committing to full immersion and no distractions, and it's almost the opposite of mobile where the world is outside you while you're trying to play and there's constant distractions. So in a way they're almost opposites for telling the story, but in a way they're also the same in that they share this kind of both this need to engage the player and the player's personality and presence in the story.
Absolutely.
And telling stories in both can be challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's a hugely important point. Does anyone have